So, just a quick intro to Mick. Mick is head of change at CMC Partnership Consultancy. His background spans military service, including special forces, and since leaving the military in 2011, he's worked across both private and public sectors. For the past 3 years, he's been part of an AI team working at the sharp end of AI adoption and organisational change. One thing you should all know, if you don't know, you should definitely look up. He hosts the excellent podcast, The Waggle Room, a podcast and publication covering AI complexity, organisations, leadership, and sense making. And he is also a beekeeper. And if you don't yet follow him on LinkedIn, you will definitely want to because he posts really, really interesting stuff, not just the Waggle Room, but much stuff beyond that as well. So with a presentation entitled "Don't Let the Machine Do Your Thinking, AI is Tool, Not Master," Mick, over to you.
Amazing. Thanks for the intro, Adrian. I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully you can all see that. I'm just going to
Absolutely.
do a little sort of Mentimeter exercise. I'll give you a few minutes just to hopefully get yourself onto Mentimeter. You scan the QR code or put the code in there. I'm not at home today. I'm in another hotel, which seems to be part of my life. So I've got my MacBook set up and my iPad, so maybe a bit of flitting around. Hopefully everything works fine. So let's see if I can get over to the Mentimeter. So there you go. There's the QR code and stuff again. So I'm just gonna go to the next screen and hopefully these will come up. And I just want again this. I'm gonna pose these questions on here. And it's just how much you agree with these statements about AI at work, I suppose. These are done on a sliding scale. And just answer them. I'll give you, I don't know, sort of 60 seconds or so. When you think about AI, does it actually help you work more efficiently at work? Does it support better decision making? Do you think AI will improve critical thinking when we think about how humans have gone through that whole critical thinking process over millennia? And I'll cover a little bit of that as we go through the presentation. And the last one is, how much do you actually trust AI generated outputs? So I can see from the screen as I'm looking at it there, like most people are scoring above 3.5 on does it help you work more efficiently, which is efficiency is an interesting question. We'll go into that. Does it help you support decision making? Slightly less, 2.7. Do you think it's going to help you improve your critical thinking? Even less again. And do you trust AI generated outputs? So these are just really setting the scene. Might come back to these later on, but I like putting these things up because a lot of you think it's going to help you work more efficiently, or it does make you help work more efficiently. But on the other end of that is you don't think it's going to improve your critical thinking. So there's a bit of a tension between those two answers as we start to go into the presentation. So I'll leave that on there for another sort of 10 seconds, just so you can see those things and absorb them, and then we can come back to them as we go through the presentation. Okay, so let's see how I get on here. So yeah, don't let the machine do your thinking. AI is a tool, not a master. I'm going to quickly go through, introduce myself. Adrian's done most of it, but this is me. I've actually worked in an AI lab for the last three years. I frame that because I'm not a data scientist, okay? I'm an enthusiastic user of AI. I've been on a bit of a, since I started in the lab, I was very, very interested in this type of stuff previously, but when ChatGPT happened, I think that's that moment in time, most people were like, oh yes, I can sort of see what's going on here. And I've been through actually bringing a large language model into an organization, doing safe to fail experiments, using it and then scaling it to, literally now one of the organizations working to like 15,000 people, which sounds great. And it is great. And I'm not here to say I don't use it. I use it on a daily basis. But when you use it long enough and you can see what's going on, and you start to maybe take a bit of a critical thinking view on it, I started to ask myself, there are things these tools give us, but what are they almost quietly taking away? Are they taking anything away? What are we losing by relying on this type of technology? Maybe we're not losing anything. Maybe we're losing something. And that's the whole point of this talk around critical thinking. There's no point B. Why do I say there is no point B? I think, especially within change work and BA work, there's always, or there has in the past, this linear model, this linear thinking about change. We're always going to define some sort of future state. We can plan the path, we can execute, we're going to get there. And I'm not saying that isn't correct in some situations. I'm a big fan of the Connecting framework by Dave Snowden, where it talks about, all the way through clear problems, complicated, complex, chaotic, and almost aphoretic, confused. So in some circumstances, when we have clear problems, there's a linear path. But when you think about AI now, I really think that it's very, very difficult to point at point B. Right? AI has just accelerated this level of uncertainty that we're all having to deal with now. You can go on the news any day of the week and there's a news story on there. And we'll go into some of this in a little bit more detail. But when you're planning now in AI, it changes so quickly. What you thought point B was going to be in 2-3 months has completely changed. So you almost now have to have multiple point Bs. So the question I think now is, how do we actually get to that point when we've got all these different permutations of what could actually happen? And it's getting more and more uncertain and more complex. And you can see this from things that have happened not that long ago and are going on at this moment in time. Right? These are just some roadmaps from organizations where they thought they knew where point B was going to be in the use of AI. So I'm sure you've seen some of these. Klarna, this is back in May 2024. They said, oh yeah, AI is going to replace 700 customer service jobs. By 2025, they realized that was not going to be the case. And very, very quietly, they reversed that decision. They started rehiring humans again because the quality of what the customer service agents were doing was not as good. If you follow AI at all and you follow a company called DeepSeek, which is the Chinese frontier model company, they can train models now that cost OpenAI and Anthropic $100 million to train. Well, they've been training models of similar and sometimes better benchmarking, but literally the way less money. So the last model they trained, which cost $100 million to train for ChatGPT, they trained it for $5 million. Right, that cost NVIDIA's shares to fall by, as it says there, 600 billion in a single day. How do you plan for that going on in an AI world? And then this whole thing, I'm sure you've seen it around graduate hiring, right? So there was this whole thing around, and it's still going on now. AI is going to absorb these sort of entry-level coding things. So, right, we're going to stop hiring graduates because AI is going to be able to do it. What people are seeing now is actually the pipeline for what you would call senior developers and coders is just drying up. And actually, there's some evidence now that coding agents are fantastic. I use them myself. But there are downsides to using this type of thing, and they're realizing that they're going to need humans back into the system. And Amazon just went through a very, very interesting thing here. You can look up on the news where they got rid of a lot of humans, set up a lot of agents. Then the agents literally took a decision where they weren't going to send any packages to, I think it was the whole of the US market on one specific day, and Amazon lost an absolute fortune. So this thing about we know where we're going is having to be reshaped, right? And I want you to keep that in your mind as we go through this. Again, I don't expect anyone to put their best friend's phone number in the chat, but just put yes or no. Who knows their best friend's phone number? Who could recite it literally off the top of their head now? I'm just looking in the chat. Yeah, no, not a clue exactly. I mean, oh, somebody can. That's funny actually. So Adrian's put there, I can recite my family phone number. So can I. It was 01752 706 146, and that's because when we used to have the answer the phone as a child, for some bizarre reason in the UK, I don't know if this was just the UK, my dad used to say, when you answer the phone, make sure you give them our phone number so they know they've got the right number. And that's muscle memory in my head. But it's very difficult to recite a phone number. I can't even tell you what my wife's phone number is, if I'm totally honest. That's not saying there's anything wrong with that. And we didn't necessarily decide to try and lose that skill of remembering those things, but we've got tools now that do it. And all of a sudden, one day, that sort of muscle's gone. And obviously, phone numbers are trivial, right? And do we really need to remember phone numbers with some of the technology we've got? Maybe not. But what else are we potentially losing when we think about offloading some of this cognitive ability to technology and especially AI, right? And it doesn't seem dramatic because these things happen quietly and we don't notice until somebody asks us, like I've just asked you about trying to remember a phone number. Just think back, like sort of 2,500 years ago. How did humans start to think about critical thinking? Right, and this is going to be very, very broad, but obviously, when you think a lot of people think about critical thinking, they think about Socrates and the Socratic method. And the thing about Socrates was he refused to accept anything just because someone with authority said it. Right. So when you think back to what the authorities have been and who have been telling us things across generations. Like once it would have been a priest saying this is correct. This is what we should all think. This changed when the printing press came on and people could produce textbooks. It didn't mean the text was correct, but we were now being fed information in a textbook. Then this sort of changed to, at work, it's your manager. So you have this whole hierarchy thing going on. And now we've got to a point where it's almost like a confident machine. All right. AI is very good. And I'm pretty sure everyone on this call has used it. And I'll just say large language models, although there's way, way more to AI. It is very confident in giving you a response. Because it's a probabilistic model. It's just trying to work out the next word it can give you. But our critical thinking, the way we've gone about this over periods of time, we're now hitting something that can give us very, very confident responses. So we've got a very old skill in critical thinking, which we're trying to have to defend against AI because it can come back with very, very confident sounding information. So the authority changes, right? The authority now is large language models for a lot of people, and they're way more confident than any of the predecessors. And the other thing about them is they remember everything that's ever been said to them. I mean, I'm sure you know, my main large language model of use is Claude. Stuff it remembers now that there is no limit on context windows. It remembers everything, and it's very, very useful and it's fantastic. But again, what does this mean for us as people working in the business analysis world and change world? What are we actually going to potentially lose? And that sort of leads me on to my next point. I'm sure some of you have heard this before. But this comes into was why I asked the first question about do you think it's going to make you more efficient? And I'm just thinking back, I think it was about 3.5, something like that. So Chevron's paradox, which I'm sure some of you have heard about, that were on the call. 160 years ago. So this guy, William Jevons, he was an English economist, and he noticed that over periods of time, it started with as steam engines become more efficient. Right? The thought was, oh yeah, steam engines are going to become more efficient. We won't need as many steam engines because they're going to become more efficient. And if they become more efficient, then we're not the fuel we put in them, we're not going to need as much of it. And actually, that the opposite happened. Okay, the use of coal actually exploded. The cheaper steam didn't mean that more people built more things. They just needed more steam and they needed more coal. This happened with fuel efficient cars in the 80s. This pattern doesn't actually, the efficiency pattern doesn't reduce consumption of something. It actually expands the appetite of it being used. And you can see this with just look at Google, how many people are now signed up to use large language models. It's not going down, it's going up. And when you apply that to sort of AI, if you apply that thinking, and this is Jevons paradox to AI, if AI makes thinking work cheaper, what is going to happen to the volume of thinking work? I think some people are starting to realize this. You can actually get overloaded with AI produced thinking material. So you don't get less material, you don't get less thinking, you get more AI thinking. And actually, what is that going to do for people working in business analysis, right? Are you going to be expected to produce more analysis faster or more topics? So the bottleneck moves, right, from necessarily efficiency in time to efficiency of thought. Well, you end up getting almost overrun. So the efficiency expands the appetite, right? It doesn't relieve us of work. And again, I'll be interested in if any of you are seeing this in actually the work you're doing now. Are you being fed, and the word that gets put around is like, they call it AI slop is the word. So how are we going to actually protect ourselves through our use of judgment, scrutiny, refusing to accept the confident message that this technology gives us just because it's easy, just because it's fast, right? And I think this is one of the really important things, because as a BA, I think our craft is actually critical thinking. Right? We want to understand problems. We want to get to the bottom of people's use case. We want to understand why a customer may be having a problem with a specific capability or product that they've got. So our whole craft is critical thinking, right? I like to think about some things that actually you already do and you already know that no LLM can possibly know. One of the things is we are very good in this profession, be it change and business analysis, of reading the room. Okay, we can surface things with stakeholders, customers, users that no AI and no large language model is going to understand, because they're not in the room, they're not having the conversations, they're not understanding what's gone before and what potentially is going to come next. We're very good at holding this sort of ambiguity. So sitting with actually not knowing goes back to the point I was making about, look how fast you put a prompt into a large language model. It will give you something back very, very fast. Doesn't mean it's necessarily correct. What we're good at is sitting with the ambiguity of not knowing until we start to form the right question. And when we get the right question, we ask the right question, we get a better output. And the third thing is this, like, surfacing assumptions. So how do we actually do that? We do that through engaging with people. Okay. You can set up as many agents as you want, right? And I use agents all the time, but they're not very good at surfacing assumptions. They can't read the room. They don't hold ambiguity. So AI is very good at giving you this signal. Okay, when you start to input information, ask to do some prompt, do some context engineering, setting up some agentic AI, but it's just a signal. It's just giving you this signal, and only really us as humans can read these silences, and I specifically call them silences um, because the AI can't hear them, but we can, right? Because a lot of silences in the conversations we have around things like who gets on with who, why is this team not working with this team, right? It's all this sort of what I call this political constraint. No one writes these things down. We just know because we have enough um, experience, knowledge of working with teams that we know that this is what's actually going on. We know the history of where things have failed previously. Okay, unless you're constantly feeding that into AI, it's not going to understand that. Um, and the person that's in the room, okay, who hasn't got a voice at that moment in time, we may know them personally. Okay, we may actually understand their point of view, and if we don't, we'll go out and we'll engage with that person or that group of people or that team or that organization. So I think it's really, really important that you think about these silences that only humans can really understand, and AI can't. All right, it's just it's not set up that way. And I'm not going to give you, absolutely overrun you in research here, and you can do this in your own time. But there is more and more research happening now around this type of thinking. What happens when we start maybe offloading our thinking, critical thinking, our judgment, our decision making, our problem solving to AI? I'm going to go over a few. So this phrase borrowed competence. Just imagine that there's a student, um, they've revised and they've used ChatGPT to break down concepts. They've asked it to explain bits that they got stuck on, um, and it seemed to give a very coherent and fluent output. Um, so when you walk in to potentially do a exam or something, you can walk in very confidently, and this is based on some research that's been done. Um, and people have gone in having used ChatGPT, and then they've gone in again 45 days later, and the lecturer or the person with a test gives them a surprise test. When they open it up, people go blank. Okay. What this research has found is that actually people who have studied what you'd class as the old fashioned way, right, taking a lot of time, effort, writing things down, muscle memory, getting to understand it, they're getting better exam results than someone that's using sort of ChatGPT to do it, because we're using the hard parts of our brain. When you're using AI an awful lot, you get this borrowed competence. Okay, so your fluency didn't actually grow. You almost sort of rented the fluency for a small period of time, and like everything that you rent, in the end, it's got to go back, and you have to hand it back somewhere. So that's the bit of the trap. Is, again, I use it all the time, and you can see that my wife's a teacher, and they're seeing this in schools now with people just constantly using ChatGPT to write information, write essays, all this type of stuff. And they're almost going back to in schools where they have to get children up to explain concepts to make sure that actually they understand what it is that they said they're doing. So again, just something to think about in how you're actually using the technology. Um, so I don't know, anyone in 3 seconds can solve that 23 times 14. I'm sure plenty of you can, to be honest. Most of us now, I do it. I'll pick this up, I'll pick my phone up, and I'll just write it into the calculator. I don't write it down. I maybe try to do it mentally with mental mathematics. But it's easy, right? We pick a calculator, and that's fine because we've had calculators a long time. Um, but that's because the tool is there. So we always sort of reach for the tool. This research that's been done here is what people call this cognitive offloading. So we're reaching constantly for the offload. So again, when you have a problem to solve or you reach for the AI. I'm as guilty as anybody for doing this myself. Right? Sometimes I think, why on earth have I just asked Claude to give me an answer to that when I sort of know the answer myself? So this research, they did research on 660 people, all ages, and they found the more people were reaching for AI, the lower critical thinking they had, and young people were hit the hardest with this. So the tool's there, we reach for it, and then our muscle doesn't fire, and then we carry on. We carry on with the next reaching for the tool. So this cognitive offloading continues constantly. All right. The next bit of research is just talking about your confidence in AI and your confidence in yourself. Again, this research was done by Microsoft and the Carnegie Mellon Institute, and they just did this with knowledge workers. So people like us, all right, people like us were in this profession, and the more confidence people have in AI, the less critical thinking they do. Actually, you think about where you've got today. For the majority of us on our call, right, we've had access to this technology for 3 years. So we've had a lot of time to build up a lot of confidence in ourselves, and we know an awful lot of information. So actually, the more confidence you have in yourself, the more critical thinking you end up doing. And I've started to do this more and more, or try and do it more and more. It's be more confident in what I already know, right? And not go for this reaching for the technology. It sort of protects you really from the atrophy of losing the critical thinking capability. If you take one finding on from something we're talking about now, it's this: have confidence in yourself. We know a lot more than we think we know. Spend a little bit of time just, mulling it over in your head, writing something down. And it's going to bode well for the future. And then I think this is quite interesting. Again, another piece of research. This is all about essay writing. Lots of research is now going on about people using AI, large language models, to write essays, dissertation, right? When people have been asked further down the line about something, they've written an essay and they've written it hugely using AI and large language models, 83% of people can't even quote a single line in the essay that they've written. Okay, because the connectivity in your brain, sort of the synapses and the neural links aren't formed, but the words never really reach the part of the brain that helps store them. Again, do we really have to use AI and large language models to write everything for us? Right? I don't necessarily think we do, but this is a principle which is called cognitive debt. All right. And you spent something to get an essay, you didn't notice, next minute the bill comes later, and the bill that comes later is you don't actually remember anything you've just written. Writing an essay, I think most of us would agree. I mean, I wrote a dissertation when I did my master's. I can almost say very, very confidently that apart from myself and my tutor and maybe a couple of other people, no one's ever read it. And that's fine. Why would they? I'm not an academic. I'm not a famous person. Most people's essays and dissertations never get read. They never even get cited. But that's not the point of writing an essay and a dissertation. The point of writing an essay and a dissertation is the critical thinking and the stress and resilience and forming of information and knowledge you have to go through in writing it. And that's where it really becomes important. So sort of, where does this lead from an organizational reality perspective? I'm just going to go through two very, very two AI sort of scenarios that are running at once. And I think these are just very pertinent in what's going on in organizations on both sides. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever, or you have, come across AlphaFold. So Google DeepMind, Demis Hassabis is a fantastic Netflix documentary about him, actually. They did this thing called AlphaFold, where using AI and using deep expertise and understanding and defining a hard problem, verifiable output, they used humans and AI to find 200 million protein structures that were never, I mean, they've been trying to solve this for years and years and years, right? What an amazing and fascinating way to actually use AI to solve this type of thing. And this is the type of thing I'm really, really excited about, is when we're using it to solve these type of problems. I think, though, a lot of us are probably in this area at the moment. Okay, we're going to roll Copilot out. And that's fine, because I use Copilot all the time. I've got a really, really good Copilot license. It does a lot of amazing things. But what most of what it actually does is for the benefit of me, probably, right? People are really trying to. I use this, and I'm trying to help people with this on a daily basis. Companies are spending lots of money on licenses, purchasing the licenses. Everyone's got an email. You've got to be more productive. There's no training. Nobody really understands what use case they're trying to solve. There's no measure of necessarily what good looks like. But the thing that's being said is, AI's got to be used by everyone. We're not really sure on what. That's fine, because we all have to experiment and stuff. But if you really want to transform workflows, you have to take a hard look at the use case and what you are actually going to use it for. And these two things can be true in the same organization. You may be using AI to solve really, really amazing use cases, and you may be just telling everyone, look, you just need to crack on and use it. And that's hard for people because they don't actually know what they're meant to be using it for a lot of the time. And there are actually things going on now where people are getting measured on their AI usage. I don't know if anybody's seen some of this stuff. So I always like to think to myself, what behaviors is this going to bring along? People are being asked, what's the volume of AI calls, regardless of what question they're being asked. Then they're accepting the first one. There's a lot of people in organizations who don't want to use it for very specific reasons, might be their job. They're just a bit fearful of it. And then you go back to the research, you then get this sort of atrophy of the judgment you're actually paying analysts to do. Okay. And you can look this stuff up yourself. There are actually companies now that are really, really being saying to people, no, we don't care. You've got to use it. You've got to use it. JP Morgan, their usage tiers based on Copilot interaction, what their adoption rates are. KPMG, they've got a 75% usage target for staff. Amazon, they're trying to get this token maximizing. They've got leaderboards. Meta, literally, it's no longer optional. And I'm not saying that isn't a good thing to do, but again, particularly ask yourself, what behavior is that incentivizing? Because research is still, there's about 80% of companies that really are finding it hard to report measurable productivity gains. So we're measuring the input, we're telling people you have to use it, but we don't really understand what the outcome's going to be. So again, go back to those 4 questions I asked at the beginning. Most people think it's going to make them more efficient, yet they still think it's going to affect their critical judgment. And then when you read these type of things, again, what questions should we be asking ourselves about the way in which we use it and what we're actually using it for? It goes back to this reading the silences, right? This is constantly being said where in lots of conversations. I mean, it's going to make us more efficient, right? Is it when I've just explained to you what Jevons paradox is, and that's been well researched and documented over hundreds of years, is it going to make us more efficient? What's efficiency actually mean? Might be efficient for me, but it might not be efficient for somebody else. And unless we transform our whole workflow, is it going to have the impact that we actually have? If you put it down to an AI about efficiency, usually it comes back saying, "Oh, it's going to give you 4% time savings, 20% productivity gains." Sounds very specific, got numbers. Is that correct? Where is it getting that information? Where is it actually getting that information from? So a lot of the time, and I've been guilty of this myself, we ask this type of question and we write down what the answer is and we sort of move on, put it into something. Yeah, okay, that's great. But actually, what I want us to think about, and I'm going to bring the Mentimeter back up in a minute, is I want us all to think about one silence that there's no way the AI is going to know about us, our organization, what we're working on, right? So I want you to think about something that's going on now where you work, where there is no way an AI or a large language model is even going to have the capacity to understand what's going on. I'm just going to bring that back up for the moment if people I've logged out or logged back in, but I'll go back to the Mentimeter. And I just want you to name one thing that an AI couldn't know at this moment in time about the organization that you're doing business analyst work on, right? And you can make these one words, you can make them statements. It doesn't matter, but it's an interesting thing to just see the word cloud build and the sort of things that come up here, because I think what you'll find, well, in fact, I can see now I'm reading it as it's coming in, right? The politics, yeah, the AI is not going to know about that. Informal relationships, tenders that you're working on, processes, new products and services. And that's because obviously because the large language models is when they're trained on massive data sets, which are, take ChatGPT for instance, it's trained on the whole of the internet, and that sounds amazing. It's trained on the whole of the internet, and it is amazing. There's a lot of crap on the internet. There's a lot of bias on the internet, but there's a lot on the internet that AI just doesn't know. And it's these things, it's this stuff here that you're putting in this word cloud that is the difference between real critical thinking judgment and how do we bring these things that we've put here. Informal relationships doesn't know about that. Internal procedures, no, unless you put them into, say, a RAG system or something like that, it's not going to know about it. Things that don't run to process. Yet stakeholder relationships, a lot of that is, we try and document stakeholder relationships a lot, but it's a lot of information, right? And most of the time it's, people do it on an Excel spreadsheet and it's got a few numbers, or these people are keep these people informed and all that type of thing. A lot of it is just what we know as people because we're having the engagements and the relationships with the people we're working with. So, and a lot of these things, I'm going to leave that up for a minute, sort of fall into three buckets that I like to think of when you think of how you're then going to take these things on this workload and then start to use them in relationship to how you use AI. And if I just go away, let me just bring the presentation back up. And that's really thinking about how you're going to form the next habit as you go into doing your work. The one thing that you can sort of do starting tomorrow, and it's going to be one thing which has got three sort of parts to it really. Think about those things that are on that word cloud, right? They're the silences that AI doesn't know about, okay? It can't do. We haven't told it, not doing the engagement that we are. And they fall within really these three things. Before you sign off on any AI output, right? just think about the things that it could not possibly know. And the things that you put on that word cloud generally fall into some of this stuff, right? It doesn't understand the context, right? You can put into an AI system a lot about context, all right? That's where, it's last 18 months ago, it's prompt engineering. Now it's being called context engineering. Yes, you can put, but there is no way you're going to put all of the context on what you're working on into a AI system. It's masses of information. Right? It goes back to what we're confident in. I'm confident because I know the piece of work I'm working on. So everything around constraints, history, people put this in the word cloud, politics of the people that you're working with. Actually, doesn't really know anything about the people, who's in the conversation, who isn't in the conversation, whose work this is going to affect. And the last bit is actually how you counter some of these things. So how can you put a strong argument against what an AI system is giving you? Well, you can, because you know that stuff in the word cloud. There are going to be counter arguments. There are going to be discussions. There are going to be people being critical about the output or the outcome that people are talking about. So we can do this as business analysts much better than an AI and a large language model can. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't really want to offload all of that onto an AI system, right? I want to offload the bits that's going to help me with, but I don't want to offload all my critical thinking. I don't want to offload all my judgment. I don't want to offload all my problem solving, right? Because at the AI, and I'll come back to this, AI gives you the signal, okay, but only you as an analyst is reading these silences. So think about the context, think about the people, think about the counter argument before you necessarily just accept what is being pushed back to you when you're using the technology. There's another video. Unfortunately, it's my fault because I didn't the sound that they've been tested with Adrian. But again, look this guy up. I mentioned him earlier, Dave Snowden. He's the brains behind something called the Cynefin framework. And it's if you've never come across it, please spend a bit of time. It's a fantastic framework for business analysts to use. What he talks about here, and this really resonates with me, is when I was in the military, when I first joined the military, there was no such thing as GPS, right? It was a map and a compass, and it was a 1 to 50,000 map, and you needed to know how to navigate using a map and a compass. And that is a brilliant skill. I've got 11-year-old twins, and I've been teaching them how to use a map and a compass. That's not because I don't want them to use a GPS, but it's like the point Dave Snowden makes in this clip here is he will go out walking and he'll take two different GPSs with him. One is the one he's going to use, one is a fallback. But every sort of third walk he does it just using a map and a compass. And as the GPS there, just as a backup in case he gets completely lost, because he doesn't want to lose the skill. He doesn't want his brain to atrophy. He wants to still understand. And sometimes GPSs can get things wrong. And I've been in a situation where I've used a GPS and I've turned to a map and compass to actually get to the crux of the matter, and it's helped me out massively in the past. So again, all about thinking how we actually use this technology for the benefit of us as business analysts. So it's over 45 minutes, and I want to leave some time for sort of Q&A. I just want to say thank you for coming along. Thank you to Adrian for asking me to come along. The thing I'll leave you with is, push back against some of the stuff that's being said around using this. And it's not said to you, I'm a massive advocate for using this technology. I'm not. I work in an AI lab. I do this on a day-to-day, every single day. But try and push back a bit. Disagree. Ask the questions that you don't think you're allowed to ask. Ask the questions that other people aren't going to ask. And if you ask a question of an AI, just think about the silences that it really, really doesn't understand that we as humans and business analysts actually do.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Mick, for a really, really thought-provoking session. I've seen already lots of virtual round of applauses, and more of them coming up now, which is even better. If you're here live, please do put your questions in the Q&A tab, and we'll cover as many of them as we can. The first question comes from Robbie, who asks, are there any strategies to adopt to use AI and mitigate the negatives? Which is an important but tricky one to start with, Mick.
Well, I think a good way to actually use it, and I'm sure some of you are doing this now, and Claude is very good at this, and so are the other models now. To whatever model you prefer, I think that's what it's come down to now, is preference. Is they're very good at um, understanding what's necessarily gone before. The more almost what I call like truth data you can put into the system to get it to answer a problem, the better. So, for instance, say you've gone out and you've done a load of surveying and questionnaires, right? Well, put that into the system as your base to work from before you actually start using the technology, because and all of these systems now have got it's almost like a RAG capability, so a retrieved augmented generation capability built into them. So they're going to look at the document or the truth that you've put in. That is going to stop the models necessarily hallucinating too much. I mean, models are getting way, way better at not hallucinating. But if you don't put anything in, and I've seen people do this, people say, give me a change plan for AI adoption. And it looks amazing. But all it's doing is bringing back what it thinks it knows about AI adoption and a change plan. And you can end up actually spending an awful lot of time polishing something that wasn't that good in the first place. The more information and truth you can actually give it to work from, the better outcome you're going to get. But again, always think about, I run stuff past other people as well a lot of the time that is AI generated. So yeah, that's how I would sort of approach the problem. But I would always, this is where this thing about it's going to make us faster, it's going to speed us up. It is if you just take it and throw it to, if I take something and throw it to Adrian, you're almost offloading. If we started offloading all our AI produced material to somebody else, that's just then time somebody else has got to go through AI produced material. And I don't think it wouldn't be a good world where we're all just working on AI generated material constantly, because actually what we'll end up doing is training the model on AI generated material and not actual real stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting as you were speaking there, Mick. I was thinking about how probably, well, I mean, it depends on the application the AI is being used for, right? But like I was thinking about guardrails, giving it guardrails of
Yeah.
what it should, and particularly if it's agentic AI, of what its permitted red lines are. And I was also thinking about actually having some sense over a period of time of how many times it's given you duff information. Because that's I think always think a really interesting thing to know. Because if you know something's giving you, say, a false positive or a false negative or a piece of incorrect information one in every 100 times, that's different to if it's giving you one in every 2 or 3 times. It might tell you that you
Mm.
need to optimize the model more, or you're using it outside of the parameters, or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and I was also thinking about, this is a slight aside, but applications of AI, because and it's gone from the chat now. It's further up. I can't find it right away. But someone was saying that they had some kind of invasive medical scan where the doctors used AI to actually, it augmented the person to spot, because AI is generally very good at pattern spotting, right?
Mm.
And I mean, I don't have the figures to hand, but I've heard that it can be superior to humans in some cases there, but you have the doctor to verify that it's actually done the thing correctly. So there might be applications where actually it's better. And just to kind of put a thing on that, and again, I haven't read the report. This was something said I heard on a radio show, um, but like a credible expert essentially saying that a study had been done that essentially showed that if all vehicles were autonomous in the US, then actually life expectancy would increase. Because if you've got an entirely with the right guardrails, of course, you would reduce most vehicle accidents. So again, those are
Yeah.
just some asides to throw in there about
No,
applications.
100%. It's the it's I literally read something the other day about people, this thing about constantly people losing jobs and that. And so the medical thing is an interesting thing because this was about radiologists. They thought that bringing AI into this would mean that you don't need as many radiologists. And what they're finding is actually you need more radiologists.
Yeah, because you can get through. I guess you can get more provisional report results quicker. So you need someone to validate
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
Yeah, excellent. So we'll quick fire through as many questions as we can. And if I pronounce anyone's name incorrectly, I apologise because you're not in the physical room. I can't ask you. So I think it might be Yevgeny or Yevgeny. What is your preferred approach framework way for thinking about the futures in plural? So, like, if you envisage different AI futures, do you have a framework that you think about them and challenge yourself with?
I just literally know. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a couple of examples, right? 3 months ago, nobody knew this thing called Claude Mythos. I don't know who on the call has read about this or has seen this, right? So you could have been planning to do I don't know, some sort of rollout with AI, and then all of a sudden, bang, Claude Mythos gets released. Well, it doesn't get released because they couldn't release it because it's so powerful. It was finding security flaws in systems that had been around for years that cybersecurity experts thought were impenetrable. Right. My approach now with this stuff is almost doing. I think looking 6 months out is the furthest you really want to go when you're working in this type of environment now, because something is going to change. And I don't have a specific framework. I just start asking myself the question, right, this is what people are saying that we want to achieve. That's fine. So, oh, we want to achieve this over the next 3 years. And I just literally list down to myself, you almost do a little bit of red teaming. So there's really good things in liberating structures. If anybody hasn't come across that, look up liberating structures. It's ways to critically think about a problem. And I just literally list down, okay, what could possibly happen over the next 3 to 6 months that we're not even thinking about. And it's from the really, really sort of crazy things to things that maybe are going to be true. And then I just list these things down. And then when I'm going into conversations with people and they're saying, yeah, this is what we want to achieve in a year, I'm just trying to be the annoyance almost to say, okay, that's fine. But what happens if we have another thing like Claude Mythos come along?
Yeah,
What happens if we find out that there's going to be there's going to be a model now being produced in China, an open source model that is better than Claude Mythos? What does that mean for us if we carry on down this road? The co-pilot thing is you see a lot of people using Copilot, and there's people rolling Copilot out all over the place. You've got to get together as teams. So I think when you will find incremental ways of using it which make things better for you as a person. I use it all the time. Can you find me a meeting between these 4 people? When is the next possible meeting? Yes, there you go. It's found it. Great. To transfer whole workflows using Copilot is not an easy thing to do.
yeah. It's kind of
It's
like
not an easy thing to do.
within its like ecosystem, it's got some quite effective use cases, but
Oh, it's
outside,
amazing.
it's a bit. Yeah, fantastic. Well, let's cover another couple of questions. So we'll do like quick fire questions now. So Nathan asks, what are your thoughts on breaking the habits of regurgitating AI produced artifacts, i.e., creating another version of a business case based on a previous version created with AI times 25 times? Although I would say humans do that because the number of times I've seen something that's been copied and pasted with the same spelling mistake for
That
25
is
years, that's a
true.
whole separate thing.
That is, yeah, I always talk about that actually, where people, it's almost, people are forgetting that we've all passed things around between us since the dawn of, where we all had to start making collateral. But I think it goes back to this point of, if we end up with all these things that are being made by AI and are AI generated, what are you going to end up with when it comes back round to you having to do something again and everything that's gone before you is AI generated? Where's that actually going to lead us? You can see this now, right? They're running out of data to train large language models on. I don't know if I'm sure people do know this on the call, but there's not enough human written text now.
That's terrifying.
There,
It's just like
yeah,
this.
there's not enough human written text. They're paying people now. You can literally go on the internet now, and there are companies set up
Yeah,
that will pay business analysts, right, to solve problems for them using prompts. And actually, what they're doing is they're taking the information that you provide to retrain other models because that they haven't. There's not enough of this stuff there for people. So again, who's going to be the person in that loop, let's say that AI loop, who is going to be the person that says, right, just stop, let's just stop for 5 minutes, let's get together, let's actually spend some time reading what is being said here, and is this the reality of what we're working in? Because if there is nobody in the loop that's going to do that, we're going to end up in
yeah,
that position where we just get absolutely fed AI guff.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, fantastic. Thanks, Mick. I mean, I feel like we could probably go on for the rest of the evening. It's such an interesting topic, and apologies if we didn't get a chance to answer your question or quite a few that came in. Mick, final question for you though. How is the best way for people to stay in touch, connect with you, and how can people get hold of your podcast?
Oh, just go on. If you go on LinkedIn and look me up, Mick Brian, you'll find me on there. You'll probably I post more stuff about beekeeping to be honest than most things, but that's where the whole my podcast comes from is because the way bees actually communicate. And I've done a talk at the business analysis conference actually, and I did one for the Department of Education a few weeks ago for their business analyst community, about how bees make decisions. It's absolutely amazing. And a lot of it's done through waggle dances, and that's where the concept of the waggle room comes from, because these are signals that you can't talk about, you can't say them, and bees don't do that. But an awful lot of scientific research in relation to how signals are sent in nature, which I think we can learn a lot from within the change and business analyst communities.
Yeah, definitely, and I would 100% recommend. I've listened. I've only had a chance to listen to a couple of them so far, but thoroughly enjoyed them. And I know, I know I got them on Spotify. I'm sure they're on other platforms as well, but it's really easy to find. It was really easy to find on Spotify because it's quite a unique name. So fantastic. Thank you, Mick, so much for taking the time today. And thank you to everyone who attended live, or indeed if you're watching the recording. Just a couple of tiny closing messages before we go. So, first of all, the next webinar is on the 7th of July, and it is Business Analysis in Flight Levels, Thriving, Not Surviving with Almudena Rodriguez Pardo. Definitely check that one out. You can see the link in the chat there too. Also, if you're not aware, there is a completely free quarterly PDF magazine, BA Digest. It's not physical, although this is a physical sign. It's entirely PDF. And yes, so you just access that at badigest.link. You don't even need to register. But if you have opted in when you signed up for this webinar, you'll automatically get a copy of that anyway. The next one out is in July. So all that's left for me to say again, massive thank you, Mick. Fascinating session. Really, really interesting.
Cheers,
Really
Adrian.
appreciate your time. And I will see everyone again soon. So enjoy the rest of your evening. See you again soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers, Adrian.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.